So we're in the shop, and as I mentioned in the first part of this series, I came across the steal of a deal on some maple veneered plywood. This stuff has one side that's already been pre-painted white, and I'm just gonna have that as the inside or the back of the cabinet, and then the exterior is going to be all maple. So the reason that I'm going this route is simply because I found a bunch of plywood at a discounted price. For these upper cabinets, they're gonna be very simple. They're gonna be 30 by 30 with 2 doors on each cabinet, and I'm gonna build 3 that are that size, and then I have to build a smaller one that's about 18 inches for the opposite side of the window. They're going to be face framed, and they're going to have Bloom 1/2 inch overlay soft close doors on them. So the first thing I'm going to do is start breaking down all this plywood, and then we're going to move on to the next step, which is assembly. Let's get right to work. If anybody wants to know the cut list, all cabinets are going to be kind of different, but for my space, the backs are 29.5 by 30, sides 12 by 30, top and bottom are the same. They're 11.5 by 29. For the 16-inch cabinet, we've got the same exact size side, and then the back is 15.5 by 30, and then the top is 15 by 11.5. These setup blocks are awesome. If you don't have any, it doesn't even have to be this brand, just get some. I use them all the time for this kind of stuff. But I need to create a 1/2 inch dado. So I've got my 1/2 inch block. This is just here to kind of reference off the blade, and I've got that locked in. And then it's going to be a 1/4 inch deep. So I use my 1/4 inch. I'm just going slightly above the 1/4 inch mark. And I'm gonna run all of the sides through the router table and put one dado or rabbet on each of them.
Now here's how that rabbet is going to look, and I actually like to run this through my router table 2 times. The first time, the bit can kind of lift the piece up and you won't get your full depth of cut. The second time usually guarantees you to have the depth of cut that you're aiming for.
Up next, grab your bottoms and tops. I've got one cabinet that's smaller than the rest, hence these are a little bit smaller. And I'm going to be drilling the pocket holes in the ugly side of the plywood. So like this side is all beat up, and that's gonna go up towards the ceiling, and this is gonna be the inside that looks nice that you'll be able to see when you open the doors. So pocket holes, I'm gonna do probably 4 on each side of these. Now this is 1/2 inch material, so make sure you set your depth bit to a 1/2 inch. This jig in particular automatically adjusts to the thickness. And the other thing is you need to get 1/4 inch pocket hole screws, preferably fine thread for plywood. These are coarse, but we're gonna make it work. For simplicity's sake, I just 4 per each, set it up and do the outer 2 here. 1 down, and we've got, I don't know, 7 to go. So we can start to kind of piece this together now. The top and bottom were a 1/2 inch more narrow than the sides. And the reason for that is these are gonna sit just like this. And that rabbet on the end is where the back panel is going to sit in flush. Okay, so now I've got the sides and the bottom and top all attached, and as this cabinet sits, it's kind of like a mid to low strength. What really is going to firm this cabinet up and increase the rigidity is gluing and attaching the back panel, because that's really going to prevent it from being able to slide one way or the other. It's also going to be a great tool to help us square everything up. We know that back panel is square. This thing could be way out of square because you can kind of rock it back and forth as is. So inserting that back panel is going to be a huge benefit, whether you use 1/4 inch or in my case, I'm using 1/2 inch because I like the ability to screw through the back of your cabinet and attach it anywhere you want to. I've seen some people use 1/4 inch plywood and then just add like a nailer strip to the top or the bottom. You could do it that way as well. I'm going 1/2 inch solid on the back. They're going to be super strong and give us that flexibility. All right, so I've got my cabinet frame, and then the back, I'm going to add a little bit of glue. Don't go overboard with the glue because the more it squeezes out, the more of a mess you got to clean up at the end. And I'm actually going to use brad nails to hold this all into place. If you want to add screws, you absolutely can. That's going to be even more strong. But these brad nails, especially once that glue sets up, are going to be plenty strong. Now, I mentioned I've got painted plywood here, so I'm putting that side up right now, and this is going to go against the wall, so nobody will ever see it. Get everything nice and flush all the way around. And then we can tack this into place. And we've got one frame pretty much ready to rock and roll. My advice, don't mount this until it has an hour or two for that glue to set up, because it can still move a little bit. I just noticed inside here I've got some glue squeeze out, so I'm gonna take care of that, and we're ready to build the other ones. Now that we have all of the cabinets built, it's time to make the face frames. And these are going to be made out of 4/4 maple. The width of the face frames are going to be 1.5 inches. The rails, the stiles which go vertical up and down, are going to be 31 inches, and that's going to give us a 1/2 inch overhang on both the bottom and the top, so you have a little bit of a lip on both. And we're going to overhang the side 1/4 inch. So the outside edges are going to have 1/4 inch overhanging from them. And then I'm going to have to do a little bit of math to figure out what the rail length is. And we'll cut that out after I set the stiles in place. I can measure between them. But everything's going to be 1.5 inches thick, so I'm going to rip all of those boards down to start. So spacer block again, 1/4 inch is what I want overhanging on the side. So if you take one of your stiles, set it into place, and then match up that overhang. You can make a little mark here, and then do the same exact thing on the other side. That 1/4 inch flush, make your separate mark. Now, to get the length of our rails, simply grab a tape measure and measure from one notch to the other, and I've got 27 7/16. So I'm gonna write that down. That's going to be the length of all of my rails, which are the horizontal pieces. Let's get all of those cut. We can start assembling.
With the help of the Kreg pocket hole jig, I was able to put 2 holes into each piece of the face frame, add a little bit of glue, clamp, and then screw those together. And the screws really give it a lot of strength and kind of act as a clamp until that glue dries. And to attach the face frame to the carcass of the cabinet, I'm using some Titebond 3, my pin nailer, which allows you to shoot these tiny little pins that are not really visible unless you get super close. And those just kind of hold that face frame in place until I can get some clamps on it. And the clamps are really what make it sturdy. And here's a close-up of those pins. I prefer these over brad nails because they basically are invisible and you don't have to fill the holes.
All right, it's the next day and I need to cut out the rails and stiles. We're doing a shaker style door, and I'm crossing my fingers that I have enough of this 3/4 inch pre-finished material to get them all done. I've got 3 scrap pieces and it's gonna be really close. These are going to be 2 1/4 wide. So I'm gonna set up my table saw and rip down a bunch of them. Then I'm gonna show you how to check and cut them to the proper length. All right, so a little bit of math involved here, not terrible. I've always struggled with it and I'm able to do this, so if I can do it, you can do it. We are figuring out our rails, which go horizontal, and our stiles. And I want a 1/2 inch overlap, so make sure you're buying 1/2 inch overlap hinges if this is the way you're going to do it. I ordered Bloom hinges, that's what I always use. Since I have a 1/2 inch overlap, I grab my 1/2 inch block, and I'm just setting this flush with the inside of the face frame, and I'm making a mark on all sides, top and bottom. Now, the stiles are really simple. You simply are going to take your tape measure and measure from the bottom mark to the top mark, and mine came out to 29 1/4. Everybody's going to be different depending on your cabinet size and how you set up your face frame. Now, where the math gets involved is figuring out the rails, the horizontal pieces. I've got my marks on both sides. I'm going to measure whatever that is, and then you need to take that measurement and divide it by 2 because you're making 2 different doors. Then I subtract 1/8 of an inch from each door because I'm going to be edge banding these, and that edge band is about 1/16 of an inch, so you have to account for that. You also need to subtract the width of your stile, which in my case is 2 1/4, and there's 2 stiles. So the way I'm building these are stiles are on the outsides and the rail goes in between those. So 2 stiles at 2 1/4 is 4 1/2 inches. So then you're going to take that number that you got, subtract 4 1/2 inches, and whatever you get, in my case it's 9 21/32, or roughly 11/16, is going to be the width that I cut my rails to. Now that might sound really confusing, but as long as you're finding your total width, divide that by 2, subtract your edge band thickness. If you're using solid hardwood, you don't even have to worry about that, and then subtract your stile width as well. Whatever that number is what you got. So I've got my stiles 29 1/4, my rails 9 21/32, not the easiest number. I'm going to go ahead and cut all those out. I'm going to be really stinking close on having enough material for all of the stiles, so fingers crossed. All right, this is critical. I just cut all the rails and stiles. We ended up with enough of the stiles, that's what I was worried about. But what I forgot to do on the rails, you need to add 3/4 of an inch to this measurement because you need to leave room for the tenon, and it's gonna be a 3/8 tenon on each side. So I just cut out 16 rails that are 3/4 of an inch too short. Now, if you skip the mortise and tenon and just do like, I don't know, you probably could just do pocket holes. You could salvage all of these, but I think I'm going to try and find another scrap piece and cut them all to the proper length and do mortise and tenon. So don't make the same mistake I did. I got in a rush, forgot to think about things a little bit, but we'll get through it. So to make matters worse, I do not have enough 3/4 material to recut all of these, and I'm just gonna push forward with pocket holes. So this will be a good test. It's for my garage. If it was for a client or in our kitchen, I probably would redo them. But I don't ultimately know if these are gonna be that much weaker than the mortise and tenon joinery. If you do wanna know the proper way to assemble these shaker stiles, in my base cabinet video, I go in depth and it'll show you exactly how to do that. Without testing these a whole lot, I would say the preferred method is to go ahead and do that. But like I said, it'll be a good side by side. The base cabinets are all tongue and groove, and now the uppers are gonna be all with pocket holes. You'll never see these because they're on the inside of the cabinet. A little bit of glue, I'm hoping that they are plenty sturdy. But moral of this story, don't get too excited and get ahead of yourselves. I'm gonna keep punching out some pocket holes.
Well, with that mistake kind of hindering me, I decided to push forward with the pocket holes, and I'm just going to run the dado through the center of each piece, and this is going to allow the center 1/4 inch panel to slide into the shaker style doors. And to get that panel, I just cut it out of a full sheet of 1/4 inch plywood. This is unfinished maple, so I just have to spray on some water-based polyurethane to get a good match to the pre-finished 3/4 material that I already have.
Putting a tiny little bit of glue in that dado that I made earlier because I don't want this panel to be like rattling around inside of these shakers. That just slides right into place. Same thing with our last rail here. A little bit of glue on each side, and then a little bit right down in that dado. Not going overboard with the glue because I don't want a bunch of squeeze out at this point in the game. So less is more for this case. But keep in mind that this is end grain, and it really does soak it up. Flip this back up. And I just made a little mess there, didn't I? Squeeze that down. Pick up some of our glue. This has all been pre-finished, I guess. So that does help a little bit as far as the glue squeeze out goes. And the most important thing when you're using pocket holes, or one of the most important things, is you need to clamp that joint extremely tight. Because if you don't, the way the screw goes down, it will shift this whole rail down, and then it won't be flush any longer. So get this clamp from them, or use a F-style clamp that you can get a lot of pressure on. And also don't over tighten the screws where you send them all the way through the front side. Speaking from experience there. I will say, I know that this was a screw up, but these went together so much faster than the mortise and tenon version. And if we're being honest, nobody's ever probably going to know the difference by looking at them. You've got pretty darn tight joints, and I'm not too concerned about the strength of it. It's just a cabinet door after all, but time will tell. This Kreg jig, I'm not sponsored by Kreg, but between this and this, I've been able to make thousands of dollars worth of cabinetry, etc. And these are the soft close hinges that I'm using from Bloom. They are 1/2 inch overlay. See that little 1/2 inch there? That's how you can tell them apart. This jig just allows you to punch a perfect hole with even spacing every time. The next step, I'm going to lay out the marks in which I'm going to pre-drill and attach the hinges for all of these doors. This is a method that I started doing years ago, and I've just stuck to it ever since. Scrap piece of wood that is the same thickness and the same height as your door, but it's not nearly as wide. And the reason that I like using this is much easier to use than a big door as far as moving around and getting your marks positioned accurately. I'm using the same 1/2 inch spacer block, and I just make a little line at the top and bottom of every cabinet, and that line is going to allow me to set my door with the appropriate reveal, and then I take a pencil and mark out the inside mark or the inside cutout of these Bloom hinges. I'm hoping you'll be able to see this, but here's my mark, and then like I mentioned earlier in this video, we are doing a 1/2 inch reveal on the top and on the bottom. Move your hinge over to the actual face frame, and then you simply trace out that mark. Now I'm going to take my pilot bit and drill right in the middle of that, and that gives me about 1/4 of an inch of adjustability. So I've got my doors almost ready to go. The last step is just to use some iron-on edge banding, and I'm not going to show you this process because I've done it in other videos. If you have any questions about it, let me know in the comments below. It's just a simple roll you iron on, press it on, trim it, sand it, call her good. So I'm going to get all this done, and then we can go and actually hang the cabinets on the wall.
And if you're going to use plywood, I highly recommend you spend the money and get the edge banding. This is what it looks like finished versus those ugly plies showing through. It's a lot of labor, but it's worth it. And this method for attaching the hinges and keeping them nice and square works really well. You just take a board that is cut nice and straight and run it across the tops of them. And as long as they are parallel to that, they're going to be nice and square. Pre-drill first.
Another random little tip that I like to do is make a little jig to drill the holes for the handles or the pulls on your cabinets. It's easy to get off the mark, but if you have a jig like this, you pretty much guarantee that everything is going to line up and be consistent.
Now, if you don't have cabinet jacks or a helping hand, this is a method that you can use, and that's cutting a piece of plywood that is the exact height you need these to be above the lower cabinets. Use a laser line to figure out where you need to hit your studs, and I use 2-inch brad nails to hold it in place until I can get it screwed together. Also, clamp those face frames as tight as you can get them, pre-drill, and run a screw to hold those face frames tight together. This is a critical step and it will keep everything looking nice and tight. I also use some pocket hole screws because they have that flat pan head on them to permanently fasten these into the stud in the wall. And then it's just wash, rinse, repeat. Having a helping hand around for this process is a huge help. If you're able to get a friend or family member, I'd highly recommend it. And since we already laid out all of our lines and pre-drilled with that jig earlier in the build process, attaching the doors to the face frames is a breeze. And this is why I really like using the Bloom or Blum hinges, because look at this fitment. It's a little too tight at the top and that cabinet would not shut all the way, but there's 3 different adjustability screws, and I'm just going to pull the top of this back a little bit, and then when I go to test it again, it's going to fit much better. And having that available to you is a huge helping hand, especially if you are a novice to the cabinetry world.
All right, here's that jig for those handles I talked to you about earlier, labeled bottom, top, and which edge faces out. I've got 2 clamps on it to hold it in place.
And you could do this ahead of time before you mount these, and it might be easier. I wasn't sure which door was going on which cabinet, so I just did it after the fact, but that jig is super helpful, getting everything aligned perfectly so all of your doors are symmetrical. Then you just pop in the applied or supplied hardware, usually just 2 bolts. And I like to get one of the screws started and then get the other one started before I tighten them down. If you just tighten one all the way down, it could kind of bend or skew things a little bit and then they won't align very well. So that's just a little tip that I like to do, and it works pretty much every time. And these soft close hinges never get old. It's so satisfying to see them function, and then you don't have to listen to the cabinet slamming shut. And I couldn't be happier with how this turned out. I hope that you guys enjoy this video and these cabinets as much as I do. Please like, comment, subscribe. It really makes a huge difference.
Well guys, we're going to call that a wrap on the garage cabinet build. There's a couple things here and there that I'll probably tinker with over time, but I'm really pleased with how this project turned out. And I hope that the videos were helpful for you guys watching at home. If you have any questions about what I did here or just in general in the woodworking world, please feel free to comment down below. I respond to all of the comments. Please like, subscribe, let me know where you're watching from, say hello. Any of that helps build my channel. And I really appreciate anybody that's tuned into this video and the last one where I did the lower cabinets. With that being said, I'm ready to kick my feet up and enjoy the garage/man cave and start drawing up the next project. We'll see you on the next build.